Hey now, metalheads, it's Black Metal Werewolf, and Halloween is finally over, so I can get back to making my regular heavy metal YouTube videos. And today I got a fun topic for all of us. So as metalheads, we all pretty much love everything about the heavy metal subculture. And rightfully so, because almost all of it is really cool. But in reality, the world of heavy metal is its own self-contained area, and it's very rare to see heavy metal influences outside of our own little box. But just because these instances are rare, doesn't mean they don't happen. And that's why in this video, I'm going to be highlighting some of the times the dark claws of influence reached out from the heavy metal subculture and had an impact on regular pop culture. Let's start out on a relatively innocent and cute note with the company Sanrio. For those of you who don't know, Sanrio is the company that created Hello Kitty as well as dozens of other cute little animal characters. Until a few years ago, they introduced another character named Agretsuko. Agretsuko is an adorable little red panda who, during the day, works in an office building. But during the night, she goes out to karaoke clubs where she dons black face paint, turns into a little monster, and screams her heart out to death metal music. So when I was doing my research for this video, this is the last thing I expected to stumble upon. Mostly because when I think of Sanrio and Hello Kitty, I usually think of characters and products designed for children, but then they introduce this one character who is a screaming death metal demon, which is really badass. But the more I did my research, it turns out that rock and heavy metal music are insanely popular in Japan. So it only makes sense that they would make a rock heavy metal character for all of the Japanese kids to enjoy too. And since we're on the topic of weird Japanese crap, let's jump into my favorite Japanese thing, Dragon Ball Z, and the villain, Frieza. For those of you unfamiliar with Dragon Ball Z, there is a character named Frieza who is a major villain in the manga and the anime. He is an alien overlord who has a little thing for committing genocide. The Frieza story arc is my personal favorite, and the final fight between Goku and Frieza I think is the best in the series. But after Frieza was finally killed off, the creator was pretty much done with the character. It was time to move on to bigger and better things. There were a few passing references here and there, but for the most part, Frieza was done. That was until a few years ago, when Dragon Ball Z Resurrection F came out. In this movie, Frieza is finally resurrected and stars in his own feature-length movie. For Dragon Ball Z fans, this was a gigantic deal. But some of you may be asking, what the hell does this have to do with heavy metal? Well, I'll tell you. The reason why Frieza was brought back was because of a heavy metal song. The Japanese metal band Maximum the Hormone released a song simply entitled F, and this entire song is about Lord Frieza. The creator of Dragon Ball Z, Akira Toriyama, heard the song and realized that the character that he created has had a gigantic impact in pop culture in Japan to the point where heavy metal bands were creating songs about him. So this one simple song inspired the creator of Dragon Ball Z to bring back one of the most popular villains, and we were all pretty happy about it. It's also worth noting that in the movie Resurrection F, the song does get played during one of the fight scenes, so that's pretty badass too. Hey, do you guys remember when video games were fun, and they weren't a gigantic waste of money on pretentious bullshit? I remember those days. And when I think about that, I'm brought back to my childhood to one of my favorite game series, Jak and Daxter. Now, the first Jak and Daxter game was a very kid-friendly platformer with some action elements in there. And believe it or not, the lead singer of Twisted Sister, Dee Snider, actually did the voice of the main villain in that game. But that's not what I'm here to talk about, because Jak 2 and 3 took the series into dark new places. Jak 2 takes the main characters and throws them into a dystopian future ruled by a horrible dictator. In this game you get a whole bunch of different guns, you get a cool hoverboard, you can steal cars. It's like Jak and Daxter met Grand Theft Auto. And the main villains in the game are actually called metalheads. Now to be fair, the enemies in Jak 2 and 3 aren't long-haired having, battle vest wearing, guitar swinging monsters. They are monsters whose heads are literally made out of metal, and they're called metalheads dozens of times throughout the games. Now I know this definitely seems like a stretch, and it really is, but I couldn't not bring this up. I love the Jak and Daxter games so much, and the fact that the enemies are called metalheads, I thought that was worth bringing up in this video. Now let's look at the comic book character who was obviously inspired by heavy metal culture, and we're talking about the anti-hero, Lobo. For those of you who don't know, Lobo is a giant, muscle-bound biker bounty hunter from outer space, and he doesn't take shit from nobody. He also looks like a member of KISS. When Lobo was first created in the 80s, he was a pretty big throwaway character that no one really cared about, but as the 90s hit and everything became dark and gritty, Lobo took off like a rocket, and ever since then, he has been a fan favorite. I first found out about Lobo years ago when I was flipping through the channels and I came across a DC cartoon, and Lobo was on the screen. And as soon as I saw him, I was like, well, that's clearly inspired by heavy metal. And after I did my research, yeah, Lobo would not exist without biker and heavy metal subcultures. Now, full disclosure, I don't have any Lobo comics. I'm not a big superhero comic kind of guy. I like more horror comics. But as I was doing my research for this, I really wanted to go out and buy Lobo comics. He seems like such a badass character that so many heavy metal fans will love. And I think I might do that after filming this. But the point still stands. If it wasn't for heavy metal music, this very popular comic character simply would not exist. Now this next part kind of took me into some weird directions, because originally I wanted to include the pro wrestler Sting into this video. Just looking at his makeup, I said to myself, well, this was obviously inspired by heavy metal, either through black metal corpse paint, King Diamond, or most likely KISS. But as I did my research, it turns out that Sting's makeup was not inspired by heavy metal at all, it was inspired by the movie The Crow. So then I looked at The Crow and said, well, where did that makeup come from? Because that looks like it was really inspired by Alice Cooper. But as I did my research, it turns out that when they did that movie, it was more inspired by 80s and 90s goth looks, which is kinda connected to heavy metal, but not quite, not close enough that I could connect it all the way. But I'm also aware that the Crow movie was based on the Crow comic books, and then I did the look of that character in the comics, and that was not inspired by heavy metal either. So I kinda came up with nothing on that one. But as I was doing my research into The Crow and into Sting, I discovered a treasure trove of heavy metal influences in the world of pro wrestling. Now, I was never a big fan of pro wrestling. It's not that I hated it, it's just nothing that was on in my household when I was growing up. But had I known that Sting and The Undertaker existed, I would have been a gigantic wrestling fan. Those two characters are so awesome. But let's put that aside for now. Because the more I dug into pro wrestling, the more I realized that so many of these wrestlers love heavy metal music, and an awful lot of them use metal songs as their intro music. And recently I found out about this one wrestler who repeatedly goes out into the ring wearing Amon Amarth t-shirts. Granted, these aren't direct inspirations from heavy metal into wrestling, these are more personal choices by the wrestlers, but it is something worth bringing out, and I'm sure an awful lot of metal fans were introduced to metal through pro wrestling. Alright, I have saved the best for last, because this last thing was heavily influenced by Norwegian black metal. And that thing is the horror movie Sinister. So, spoiler alert, because I do have to go into the plot of the movie to explain what I mean, so if you haven't seen Sinister before, turn the video off right now. So, the movie centers around a true crime writer who is looking into a horrible case where an entire family was murdered and their youngest daughter has gone missing, and no one has ever been able to solve the case. The big twist of the movie is that there is an evil pagan deity named Bagul who influences the youngest children to murder their families, and after they have done that, he takes them, brings them to his netherworld, where then he feeds off of their souls. This is some seriously dark shit, and there are a lot of disturbing scenes in this movie. If you have not seen it, I highly suggest you watch it, because it is very dark and a great horror movie. Now, for the metal influence, the evil pagan deity Bagul was 100% modeled after black metal musicians. When they were designing Bagul, they came across black metal bands like Mayhem, Emperor, Immortal, and many others, and saw these crazy guys with the long black hair, the black evil makeup, the cloaks, and they took that and 100% turned it into that character. They openly admit it. And in the movie, there is even a passing reference to black metal. Granted, it's not much of a reference, but any metal fan watching this movie will 100% pick up on all of the references and inspirations. So if you haven't seen Sinister, go do so now because you won't regret it. So those are just a few instances of heavy metal having an impact on broader culture. But now I want to get your guys' opinion. Are there other ones that you love that I did not mention in this video? Is there a TV show or a song or a movie or a video game or a book that was 100% inspired by heavy metal? Please leave that down in the comments. I would love to know, and I'm sure other viewers would love to know too. And now, like my past videos, I either do an album recommendation or an album warning, and today is another recommendation. The band is Insomnium. It is their new album, Anno 1696. So everybody already knows that Insomnium is a great band. You don't need me to tell you that. But for anyone who has never listened to Insomnium or has yet to pick up this album, I highly suggest that you do, because it is yet another masterpiece. My favorite songs were Godforsaken and The Witch Hunter, but every song on here is great. So check it out. Once again, that is Insomnium, Anno 1696. So that's it for today's video. If you like what you saw, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave me a comment letting me know what you thought of today's video, checking out some of my past videos, and sharing them with a few of your friends while you're at it. If you would like to keep up with me on a more daily basis, you can follow me on Facebook and on Instagram. I also have patches for sale, so if you would like to get your very own, you can click right over here. There's also a link down in the description. Overall, thank you very much for watching, guys, and don't forget to stay brutal.